3, 2, 1. This is What's Left America, and I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
And I'm James Campbell.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends just like you. Today on the show, we've got some really good topics. Never Nancy, is that the new battle cry? CIA, Assange, Russia, and MBS. Acosta versus Trump and Mueller Wars. And, of course, we're going to end the show with Out of Left Field, as we always do. Let's get right into the show. We're going to start that off, of course, with my
Never Nancy.
Never Nancy. It was all out of whack there. Never Nancy. Is that the new Democratic battle cry? A band of House Democrats determined to oppose House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi's speaker bid are planning to release a signed letter as soon as this week indicating that they have gathered enough support to deny her the 218 votes needed to win the gavel on the House floor in January, a move that they say would complicate her path to a second term as Speaker and force renewed discussion about her stepping aside. What do you think, Chris Bell? You've been there.
Well, I think she'll end up pulling it out. I'm disappointed on a lot of fronts. One, as I've said on the show previously, I think she's been an excellent leader. The Washington Post had a fantastic opinion piece this week pointing out that people say that she is such a lightning rod for the Republican Party, pretending that whoever would replace her would not be a lightning rod for the Republican Party. Folks, that's what they do. They tear down Democrats. If you're the Democratic president, you're going to get torn down. If you're the Democratic Speaker of the House or Majority Leader of the Senate, you're going to get torn down. So that's absolutely an absurd reason. And they also pointed out what an effective record she had when she was Speaker, and they haven't really put anyone forward that could replace her in that regard.
That's the simple fact, is that the people that are opposing her have no one to step up and say, I will run against her. And so why the strong opposition if you don't have anyone ready to run?
Well, first of all, I have to say, you guys sounded like a bunch of crusty old boomers last week when I wasn't here, and that snarky millennial was here just like busting y'all chops every time y'all had a take. How did that feel?
Wait a minute. Are you including me?
No, I'm talking about the two Chris's.
Okay, because I'm a boomer. Very last.
For crying out loud.
Day.
Crying out loud.
But I'm so glad you put that on the table, because
part.
there are people, and most of them younger, that want to start an age war in the Democratic Party, completely overlooking the fact how hard some of us have had to work during some pretty damn dark times in the Democratic Party. And frankly, I'm offended by it, and I'm sick of it. And I think it's a ridiculously stupid thing to do, to pretend that just because I'm over 50 years old, I can't share some beliefs with a 22-year-old.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. But his point was also about policy as well. And I think that my perspective is this. I think that Nancy Pelosi will be reelected. I think you have a faction of the Democratic Party, the two conservative Democrats, Moulton out of Massachusetts, and another one whose name I forget. But I think that what they have to understand is Nancy Pelosi is an incredible strategist. She knows how to organize and herd the cats. It's not just one thing to pass legislation. You have to know how to kill legislation. And she's been in Congress. She knows how to navigate. She's an incredible fundraiser. And oh, by the way, most of her positions have been progressive. And so people who are coming in from this freshman class who have already said no to Nancy Pelosi really doesn't understand how that process works.
And they said no because they were forced to during their campaign, because she is a lightning rod, and they made her an issue in almost every competitive congressional race in the country.
Right.
And so they had to come out. Lizzie Fletcher, who is now saying she's going to support Nancy Pelosi here in Houston, had to say, well, I'm not going to be controlled by Nancy Pelosi, and I'm sure she won't be controlled by her, but she's going to support her for Speaker.
And you bring this up like I haven't been saying since we started this show, that the Democratic Party needs new and younger leadership, which I've been saying all along. And that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to Nancy Pelosi or her leadership style, But I have been saying all along that the Democratic Party needs to bring in new and younger leaders and bring them up through the party because it's time for some change.
I absolutely agree with that. But last week you sounded like, "Get off my lawn." but here's the thing.
That was the style. That was the style, not the message.
but you're right. I think that the Democratic Party. Look, we're in Houston. And the NAACP leader of the Houston chapter has been around for years. He's almost 80 years old. And you have a group of young African Americans in their 30s, 20s, and 30s who have never been a part of the NAACP in the process. And they have decided to stage a coup to take over the local chapter. So these progressives and these young freshman class that's coming into the Democratic Party, that's the beauty of the Democratic Party. We have a bigger tent. We have discussions. We allow for progressive ideas while also governing from the middle. And I think that's what we have to think about doing.
Which is part of the problem, Andy, is when you're governing from a tent the size of the Democratic Party, it's hard to have a message that fits all of those people.
Well, we don't have a top-down structure the way the Republicans do, I don't think. But I wanted to address Chris Bell's anger, and I just suggest that what we are dealing with now is more of is a problem that sort of came about organically in that we're all living longer and we're all healthier longer for more years, and so. Whereas you would have someone, in their 70s sort of on the decline and moving out, now a person can be in their late 80s, they're sticking around, they still have more to offer. So what the Democrats need to do is to have a farm team. And the leadership, I don't think, has been willing to cultivate that new leadership. So it's not, and then when you get into that kind of situation where younger people don't see any path, then they want to do things like Campbell just said, stage a coup.
Well, but one of my problems with all of this argument goes back to something I heard back when I was serving on the Houston City Council in the 90s, and someone came to me. At the time, there were very few women on city council, and she said, we need to start electing a lot more women to the city council. And I said, well, that's fine if I agree with their political views. I have no problem with that at all. I don't care if they're, man or woman, if, we can work together and we share, similar positions. But I don't want someone on there just because they're a woman if they completely disagree with everything I believe from a policy standpoint. Just electing someone because they're female, I don't see what that accomplishes. And the same thing holds true for age. If someone is a talented young person, more power to them. Get out there and run. And everyone acting like we've been standing in their way, especially in a city like Houston, the great land of opportunity, no one stands in anybody's way. And if they want to run and can put the campaign together, they can most likely win and serve.
Well, you know what? That's exactly what they're talking about. We want to run.
Well, and they can.
And we're amassing the votes.
And a lot of them ran this time, and a lot of them lost, and a few won.
So
that's fine. That's the way the system works.
17 Democrats. Newly elected Representative Jeff Van Drew of New Jersey has 17 Democrats have signed a letter opposing her, and that's pretty close to the number they need to block her. And he said there's nothing that she can say that's going to cause them to vote for her. And that's 17 Democrats that are going to oppose her getting the speakership. Now, if she gets it put together and wins the speakership, what happens to these newly elected Democrats?
But go back to the way it's going to work, because the first vote is in the caucus as to who the nominee from the Democratic Party is going to be. And one of the stories pointed out that a lot of people voted against her previously, and then only 4 voted against her on the House floor.
Right.
So if she gets out of the caucus, then she's going to be speaker.
She'll be speaker. Okay, and they can vote for her in the caucus, and then
they can oppose her in the caucus, but they're not going to oppose her on the floor, because then you'd either be voting present, which they could do, or they'd be voting for a Republican, which I don't think they're going to do.
Well, let's address the issue of cultivating the new leadership, because there does have to be new leadership at some point. The Democrats aren't doing that.
But,
why
but
don't
she
we
could
do it
that,
better?
and I think she'll get the message and do it through committee chairmanship.
And
well,
she's
but
talked
she can't
about
do it
that. She has
completely
talked
through.
about wanting to have a smooth transition, but there's got to be a structure in place.
But Nancy Pelosi went out and recruited a lot of these candidates to run. And I think that you're absolutely right. We need to be talking about a succession plan to replace these people who have been incumbents for years. And I think that happens both at a national level, but it also happens at a local level. And I think they need to start identifying really promising young candidates to start cultivating them to run for office. But when it comes to
I'm talking about within the Congress, as far
yeah,
as
no,
James is talking about the same thing.
I'm saying the same thing. But in my mind, the important thing here are the issues. And Nancy Pelosi is a progressive on all of the issues: health care, taxes, immigration, gun violence. I'm not sure what they want aside from Medicare for all or education for all. And that's a discussion.
That's what they want.
I'm for Nancy. I'm
and-
for Nancy. I would vote for Nancy Pelosi. I'm just trying to understand or explain my theory about why you have this rebellion of younger legislators.
And I think also you need a really smart legislator like Nancy Pelosi against this administration.
No question about that. There's no question about that. And that brings me to the next point I want to bring up, is Donald Trump backing her for Speaker. And he's openly backing her for Speaker, and there's only one reason he's doing that, because he thinks if she's Speaker, it helps him in his reelection campaign. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Well, that could be true. He'll have a target to demonize.
Right.
But that's okay, because Nancy Pelosi won't be the first time she's been demonized. Right. And so this wasn't effective for him in this last election, because the Democrats won seats hand over fist and are well ahead of what they even predicted they would do to turn the House. And so, yes, she'll be a target, but she's going to be a worthy target that he's not going to be able to outsmart, because he's not been able to do it yet. So, maybe, but I don't think he's going to win on that.
Tom Reed, Republican Tom Reed, and some other Republicans are committed to backing Nancy Pelosi for Speaker if she agrees to enact a package of rule reforms. Chris Bell. Reed is a co-chairman of a bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. Never heard of this. Said that the growing frustration with gridlock and polarization and a top-heavy leadership approach in Congress are the reasons why several members of his party, the Problem Solvers Party, are willing to supply Pelosi with some Speaker votes in exchange for extracting an overhaul of the House rules.
Well, it's his caucus, but I couldn't figure out, is it a bipartisan caucus?
I think it is, but it's mostly Republicans. Is the way I read the article. And
Is
the
he a
research that I had.
Republican?
He is a Republican.
Well, that would be odd, seeing Republicans vote for a Democratic
They will
speaker.
Tom Reed said they will give some Republican votes if she will agree to rule changes. And the problem is and Nancy Pelosi said, I don't need your help.
Well,
because
yeah,
those
I'm sure
rule
she
changes,
she probably looked at the rule changes,
Yes,
and the
you could
House is
forget-
all about the rules.
That's
and
right.
That's how you block things or
Yeah.
pass things.
Have
And
you looked at the-
whoever the majority party is makes the rules.
I'm sure she
That's
said,
one of
have
the
you-
problems with Congress. You forget all the rules you learned on the playground.
That's right.
It's a whole new game.
I'm
once
sure she
you're-
said, have you
you're
looked at
there.
the Senate lately? No, thank you.
But here's the thing. I think the thing about the difference in this class is I think people elected these people to come and govern. And that is the problem. There's been no governance.
There's no governance, right.
And so, Nancy Pelosi is going to be smart in terms of what happens in the House. And she's going to tell these new people, we need to resist the urge to, think about impeachment. We need to keep our eye on the ball on health care, on immigration, on taxes, on wages, those things that are important to the American people. Infrastructure, those are the things that Nancy Pelosi is able to do, is keep her people focused.
Absolutely. If you the way to win elections is to point to achievements, not to investigations.
Well, that's what I think too, Andy. But if you listened last week, what Evan was saying, we should be investigating everything. We should be
that's what I
that we should be
disagree with,
voting for impeachment. We should, bring as much discord to the process as possible. And James, I agree with you. I think people are fed up with that and they want to see some results. But it seems like some of the younger folks are saying, no, this is our chance to really stick it to Donald Trump.
Well, I'm not saying that they can't do that if whatever comes out of the Mueller investigation says, okay, we need to look at this, or with this new attorney general, there's some things happening there that might warrant a legitimate investigation.
Yes.
But I don't want that to be the focus.
There needs to be some investigations that have to be done that the Republicans refuse to do. But to investigate everything, to bog Congress down,
Right.
investigating for the sake of investigating, the public is going to get livid about that.
Right.
Do the investigations that need to be done, that should have been done, that Congress refused to do, and then but get meaningful legislation passed at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what needs to be done.
And Andy, investigations that'll make Donald Trump do what?
What do you think?
Apologize. Don't you think?
Apologize.
I thought it would make him subscribe
right. Well, now we gotta-
to the.
We got to move on, but I want to bring up one thing that's really off the topic of Nancy Pelosi. But this is something that Chris pointed out a minute ago. Beto O'Rourke, this came out I think today or yesterday, made a stronger showing in Texas than we really knew. The I-35 corridor, which is Interstate 35 from I-35. From Laredo from Laredo to the Oklahoma border, that's only about 1,500 miles or so.
It's a lot.
A lot.
It's a fur piece, as we say in Texas.
For a piece. By making a strong showing in the 21 counties along the Interstate 35 corridor from Laredo to the Oklahoma border, in the U.S. Senate candidate from El Paso defied 30 years of political history in the Lone Star State. O'Rourke didn't just become the first Democratic Senate candidate in Texas to win the majority of votes along the corridor since the 1980s. He pounded U.S. Senator Ted Cruz along the route, flipping counties that had not voted for a Democrat for a statewide office since Ann Richards first ran for governor in 1990. Even in counties O'Rourke lost, his defeats were often much narrower than those in of past Democratic candidates. That really shows a much stronger showing than we had first initially thought that O'Rourke had in his race against Ted Cruz. And it shows, I think, a much stronger Democratic presence in Texas than we thought initially.
Well, and it puts the state in play in 2020, and it could completely change the map. Texas has 38 electoral votes. The only state that has more is California with 55, and that would completely change the presidential map if this is a state that Democrats can compete for.
I agree with that. I think that when the Democratic Party in the state of Texas does a forensic on this election and looks at what Beto did, they need to figure out a way to put that in a playbook so they can use it in the 2020 election.
Right, but what it also does that I think the Texas Democratic Party needs to start paying attention to is the Texas Democrats picked up in the Texas House 12 seats. 12 seats. And if they can continue that in the 2020 election and continue moving that cycle and take that legislature back, and that 2020 is the year that they're going to redistrict.
And they were talking about that because you're obviously redistricting plays into a lot of congressional seats would be in play then. It could change the makeup of the entire delegation. So there are very bright days ahead, and I think there are already moves afoot to try to capitalize on the O'Rourke energy, so to speak, and to look at what he did and to institutionalize some of those things.
Yeah, I think what's happened in Texas is that the Republican Party has overreached on what they think Texans want, particularly on cultural issues. And I think the Democrats really have an opportunity on real substantive issues. Right. And I think if they can, as Chris said, institutionalize some of what Beto did, especially on education and health care and jobs, then I think they'll be successful.
But it's age and geography, too. And the only thing that saved Ted Cruz in the election was the rural vote.
Yeah,
and the rural vote is shrinking and
right,
dying.
yeah, that's the
and
point I want to
the
make.
The urban vote is
that's exactly right.
expanding and quite young.
Yeah, because you have a bigger population, and bigger population centers of Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, they are listening to different messages, and I think that's where the opportunity lies.
Right. Like I said, when he took Tarrant County and y'all all laughed at me, he apologized last week. Go ahead. Come on. Say it.
You got to go.
Apologize. Everybody wants someone to apologize.
All right, let's move on. CIA, the CIA, Assange, Russia, and MBS. I found this article when I was putting the show together, and what I think is just a shocking move. Soon after he took over as CIA director, Mike Pompeo privately told lawmakers about a new target for American spies, Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. He was intent on finding more about Mr. Assange's dealing with Russian intelligence. The CIA began last year to conduct traditional espionage against the organization. At the same time, federal law enforcement officials were reconsidering Assange's designation as a journalist and debating whether or not to charge him with a crime, which they did. Pompeo and former Attorney General Jeff Sessions unleashed an aggressive campaign against Mr. Assange, reversing an Obama-era view of WikiLeaks as a journalistic entity. For more than a year, the nation's spies and investigators sought to learn more about Assange and his ties with Russia and officials. And then we now know that they secretly got indictments against Assange and took away the WikiLeaks protection as a journalistic entity. And I think that has two problems. First, it flashed right in the face of what the president's been saying since before he became president. And second, I think it has huge First Amendment implications down the line when you look at what the president does with respect to the press.
Yeah, so the indictments that were uncovered is the new thing.
Right.
But back in February of 2017, Donald Trump tweeted that the U.S. media was the enemy of the people. Mike Pompeo made a public speech before the Center of Strategic and International Studies. And at that speech, he basically called out WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. And Glenn Greenwald, that's his name, Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept, which is this public policy news site, basically said nobody said anything about that. There was no outcry from the media or anybody about Mike Pompeo saying he's going to go after WikiLeaks. The reason why that's troubling, Chris, is that can become a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. And if you allow Pompeo to go after Assange because you don't like him politically, or you think that he may be sided with the Trump administration in releasing these emails, then that's one thing. But to have him single out an entity like WikiLeaks, down the road, it could be, CNN or the New York Times. So this becomes a slippery slope. And so it's easy for us to say, we don't like Julian Assange because he derailed Clinton's campaign. But we have to be careful about signing on to stuff like this.
You have to be careful, but Julian Assange certainly has not operated
that's exactly
like a
what
traditional journalist.
I know.
They focus all of their attention on the United States, and they basically ask people to, commit acts of treason.
They do ask people to steal secrets from the CIA and from the military.
That's not new. People have been trying to steal secrets forever. What he's done is release documents that helps them do that. And so, what I'm suggesting, Chris, is that it could become a slippery slope.
I'm in agreement with you on that.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble with finding the distinction between WikiLeaks releasing the things they've released in the Pentagon Papers back in the 70s.
There's every possibility that the United States government is just trying to help out Ecuador. He lives in the the Ecuador consulate building and has for years now.
And they want him out.
And apparently he won't pick up his room or clean up after his cat, from what I heard this week. And so maybe that's why they want to really put the screws to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an interesting, and again, I don't see the much difference between this and the Pentagon Papers back in the 70s. Where do you draw the distinction there?
Part of the problem is that everything that Julian Assange has leaked, the problem is it all goes to the benefit of the Russians, the benefit of Trump, and so that leads one to believe that there is interference in the election, and then there's the timing issue. So it's not like there's no probable cause for anything, and I don't have a problem with this guy being investigated. What I have a problem with is if the investigation turns up nothing, and then we just keep trying to go after him.
But if Pompeo's indictments, if they indict him and they get this information, that actually could help Mueller in his investigation of Trump.
Yeah, which seems counterintuitive.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think this again has a deeper consequence, and allowing him to move forward with something like this. And whether we like Julian Assange or not, I think that we need to really watch this carefully to see where it goes, because I worry that with Trump's affinity for the media, this could take a crazy turn.
At the same time, the Central Intelligence Agency has concluded that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, ordered the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, according to American
that's a
officials.
surprise.
Yeah. Well, they've now stated it publicly that they have concluded that he did order it. The CIA made the assessment based on the Crown Prince's control of Saudi Arabia, which and other intercepts of telephone calls and other work. This change in the CIA thinking came as new information emerged. Intercepts showed that Prince Mohammed was trying to find ways to lure Khashoggi back to Saudi Arabia. Although the Crown Prince did not specifically say in the phone call that he wanted him killed, he was killed immediately upon entering into the consulate. How's this going to change President Trump's
Well, that's quite a mix-up when you think you're just going to bring somebody back to Saudi Arabia. Instead, you take a whole dismemberment kit and someone specialized in doing it. Just pad communication.
Yeah.
I mean, this surprises nobody. Everybody's pretty much, I think, sensed from the start that this was how it was going to play out. And interestingly, Donald Trump always seems to be on the wrong side of these arguments, and they're trying to protect our relationship with the guy who would order a murder.
He said nothing yet, but
and they still won't.
Yeah.
The administration still isn't accepting
but
it.
the Saudis have now released publicly that they have they're going to seek the death penalty against 5 of the people who killed this guy, and you know why they're going to do that,
right?
Yeah, there's just so that nobody can ever talk to them.
Yeah, it's going to be optics as well, but yeah, this surprises no one, and I think that for me, it's pretty much old news because Trump is not going to do anything about this. And so I don't even know why we're discussing it. I mean, it's just, one of these deals where, we aren't going to change it. Trump is not going to change anything.
Well, I'll tell you why
the Saudis are going to do what they want to do, and nothing's going to happen.
Well, I'll tell you why I wanted to discuss it, because I think it's disgusting that our United States government is going to sit back and let someone who had the right and a green card to live in this country get murdered by another country and do nothing, and it pisses me off.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, and it goes back to a point that Rick made, Rick Mitchell, who was on our show. This is about silencing a journalist, and if the Trump administration is not going to say anything, then that further, I think, decays our democracy and image in the world as a protector of free speech and the rights of the press.
And it really is something, because you have to think the Crown Prince probably thought, Lord knows who gets knocked off over there, but I'm sure he thought he could pull this off. No one would say anything, and it would just be another day at the castle.
Right.
But instead, it caught the entire world's attention. Certainly, it's caught a lot of attention here. And who would have figured Donald Trump would come out on the absolute wrong side? Everyone.
My first thought upon hearing this news was that scene in Pulp Fiction where it's like, hey, I want you to take out so-and-so. Take him out. Take him out.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Acosta versus Trump. Jim Acosta takes round one on a technical. Everyone thought this was a First Amendment case except Judge Timothy Kelly, who was appointed to the bench by President Donald Trump. He granted CNN's temporary restraining order not on First Amendment grounds. Granted it on a Fifth Amendment due process ground. The judge specifically said, and he purposely said, I'm not ruling on the First Amendment question. He found that, quote, rude is not a standard, and if it was, no one would be allowed in the press conference at the White House.
And we wouldn't be able to have this podcast.
Yeah.
I just thought that was hysterical. Rude is not a standard. The second ruling, he said, Trump's statements to Acosta at the conference were not noticed that he was going to lose his credentials. The government was arguing that. 3, no one could identify why he actually lost his credentials. And 4, the government conceded that he did not place his hands on the intern. So because it's not here's my question, the fact that this is not a First Amendment ruling, does it matter?
Well, no, it's not a First Amendment ruling because it doesn't really silence Jim Acosta in being able to report, but it does keep him from being in the White House. So it's a process issue, and that's why the Trump administration is saying they're going to change the process. But before I go further, I have to take issue with my sister, my beautiful sister, Andy Joyson over here, in the comments that she made last week about April Ryan and the other African-American reporter that are in the White House. I think that I absolutely disagree with you because Donald Trump has shown a particular disdain for journalists of color. And when I became, I don't know, the second African-American to cover City Hall at Houston, in Houston, I thought, for me, that was a privilege.
Right.
And so these people that cover the White House press corps have earned the privilege to be a part of that press corps. If you look in that room, there are very few journalists of color. And so they are not only people who deserve to be respected, they're also role models for young and aspiring journalists. And if they see the president openly disrespecting these women of color, mostly, then that sends a bad signal.
Right.
Again, he also disrespects Don Lemon, who is the evening anchor at CNN, and he always calls into question their intelligence. Right. And that bothers me because if you're going to call into question somebody's intelligence just because they ask you a question,
right,
then shame on you.
Let me tell you what he's doing. With Jim Acosta, he feels that his base likes the fight with Jim. So that's why he attacks Jim Acosta. But wait a minute, hang on. But the second thing that he's doing with Jim Acosta is, and what he's doing with April Ryan, and I can't remember the other lady's name, but what he's doing with them is when anybody asks him a serious question he doesn't want to answer, he attacks back and tells them to shut up and sit down. And that's what he's doing. And with April Ryan and the other lady, they are
Amy Kremer.
Yes. They are being respectful of the presidency, and they don't bite back like Jim Acosta does and say, wait a minute, you're not going to treat me that way. I have a question.
Right.
And that's what's happening.
Well,
Yeah,
CNN came under fire for filing the case and taking it this far by some. I know Bob Woodward spoke out against them, but I'm glad they're doing it,
Yes,
because I think that you have to draw some lines, and it has been pointed out on our show, is that this is a whole new day, and Trump has taken a stand against the media like no other, and you can't let that go without standing up for
last
yourself.
week they were talking about you should have, Corey Lewandowski, one of Trump's supporters, was arguing about decorum to Chris Cuomo. Yes, you should have decorum in the White House, but that doesn't exclude you from asking tough questions of the president of the United
Yeah,
States.
exactly. And President Trump, the day after they banned Acosta, he was talking about it. He said, when you come into the White House, you have to treat it with respect and dignity. And that was when the African-American lady asked him a question. And immediately after he said that, she asked him a question, said, "You're an idiot." Well,
Yes.
where's the decorum, Mr. President?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. And when he actually points out to an African American reporter,
Right.
that basically calls into question their intelligence the same way he does to Maxine Waters, the same way he does to LeBron James, and those other.
But the question she asked him was not only valid,
It was a legitimate question.
and it was a hard question that he did not want to answer.
Yes, and that plays to his base.
Right.
But I think it disrespects the privilege that these reporters
I
have
get it.
earned to be a part of the White House press corps.
But the point I'm trying to make is Jim Acosta is a white male who feels like he can stand there toe to toe and say, "I'm sorry, Mr. President, I have a question I want you to answer."
Did y'all get that break of Christopher going over to get some ice in his
And
glass to refresh his drink?
Said, "I don't." But Jim
I was
Acosta
turning
is
the air conditioner
willing
down.
to say, "I have a question I want you to answer, Mr. President."
Yes.
And these ladies, I fear,
They ask-
don't feel like they can say that.
Yes.
Okay.
But they should have the right to do that.
I
because
agree.
they earn the privilege to be in that room.
I agree, but I think that they are being more respectful of the presidency
Right.
than they should be.
So, as a result of this ruling, the White House has come up with a new policy for press credentials that could take away Jim Acosta's press pass, and which is, totally insane to me because, if you are part of the White House press corps, you should be able to ask tough questions
Yes.
without any rules around them because you are the president of the United States.
and you should have to answer
And
questions.
as Sarah Sanders, you are representing the White House. You
Right.
should be able to ask her tough questions.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Can Jim Acosta ever be effective in that room again?
No, he's made himself a part of the story.
Well,
He's,
I disagree with that. I don't think he made himself a part of the story.
this has been going on long before this,
after
and he likes his role. And
well, after the court hearing and banning in the court hearing, can he ever be effective in there again?
I think so. I mean, he's going to ask his questions, okay? Most of the stuff that comes out of that, it's like when you cover City Hall or the county government, you had those gaggles at the end. Everybody
No one
was
ever
trying.
says anything.
Nobody says anything that's not everybody's going to be reporting, right? And so when you ask a tough question of somebody in a public forum like that, particularly elected officials, I don't know what his goal is or what his motives are, but there's nothing in that gaggle that's going to be secret. Everybody's going to be reporting.
But does the public, after this really public fight between Acosta and the president, does the public ever view Jim Acosta's stories as fair?
Well, that's a very good question, Chris. I don't know. I assume that if you are a CNN viewer, that everything that Jim Acosta does will be fair to you, or even if you are a middle of the road, an independent, you might think what he's doing is fair.
What do you think?
all those Trump supporters who watch CNN on a regular basis aren't going to trust Jim Acosta.
That's exactly right.
You worked in the media for years. What do you think? I mean, is Jim Acosta damaged as a result of this fight?
Jim Acosta is the Wayne Dolcefino of the Washington press corps. Wayne Dolcefino
You might wanna
is a
explain.
Houston thing. Look it up. Here's the thing.
Google.
I understand why you're calling me out for that. My thing is, we can say Donald Trump is racist. Donald Trump is even more racist when it comes to black women. He hates women. He hates black people. He hates people from shithole countries. He hates.
He doesn't like fat, ugly people either, though.
No fat, ugly people. Women who are quote unquote too ugly to fuck. We already know that the man has not a redeeming quality whatsoever. The point that I was trying to make, first, the mistake that I made was not letting Chris Tritico make the point that these journalists were trying to ask substantive questions, and that's when Trump cut them off and insulted them. Agreed. My point is, and I've been saying this for a long time, I want the media to learn how to cover this administration that it is not in the way that whatever scandalous thing or dramatic thing happened, we focus on it for a week. So April Ryan is a big girl. She can take care of herself. Yeah. She knows how to handle the president. We don't need to take care of her. What we need to do is to hope and encourage the media to focus on those important questions that she's trying to ask. She's not going to get the answer to her important question from the president standing at the podium. What she and Jim Acosta need to do is go out and find the answer somewhere else and stop worrying about the shiny thing.
Who was the White House reporter that was on our show on the phone that day? Because I asked her, why are we covering the tweets? And she said,
Julie Mason.
Julie Mason. I said, why are y'all covering tweets? And she said, those are official White House statements.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's the old school way of thinking of it. And they are. But everyone who is on Twitter, which is every news person, every journalist, every person who's interested in the news, Twitter is different from Facebook. They have already read the president's tweets, and they've read all the commentary about it, and they've read all the journalists' analysis and response to the president's tweets. So let's let Twitter do that, and then let's let television, magazine, radio, and newspapers cover the actual issues of the day.
And he's been playing this game and winning, going back to his campaign in 2016. It started with the Spanish-speaking television journalist. I can't remember his name, but had him thrown out of a news conference and got all sorts of coverage. But his base obviously likes it, and that's why he continues to win by making these reporters targets, and they need to quit playing right into the trap.
But I just want to take issue with something that she said.
Again?
Yeah.
Leave her alone.
I'm not picking on it, but I'm just going to say
we're here to stand up for black women.
That was James's revenge for when you beat me up on Serena. My take on Serena.
Fair enough.
One more point, and we got to move on. This is a little slightly off topic, but
Jorge Ramos was that.
Yeah, that's right, Jorge Ramos. Conservative lawyer George Conway, the husband of presidential counselor Kellyanne Conway, and a frequent critic of the administration, said his views on the administration were tested when he was under consideration to lead the Department of Justice's Civil Division last year. But he ultimately withdrew saying the administration is like a shit show and a dumpster fire. And I'm like, I don't want to do that, he said on a podcast later, adding, if I get this door prize, I'm going to be in the middle of a department Trump is at war with. And I just had to bring that up because I would love to hear the conversation at the Conway home. How was your day, honey? Well, I spent the entire day getting my ass chewed out because of your damn tweets.
Yeah, but the guy, it's really interesting because he's been in the news several times of late for criticism of Donald Trump, and just this week led the effort for some prominent members of the Federalist Society to pen an open letter talking about how this administration doesn't respect the rule of law, and they need not lose sight of that. As conservative lawyers and noted conservative lawyers, they're speaking up and saying this president's treatment of the press, this president's appointment of Matthew Whitaker, a lot of things fly in the face of the
rule of law. He's all over it.
Well, I kind of see it as the same kind of relationship that George, was it Corville?
Yeah,
Madeline
Madeline
Yeah.
had, because you
James
have
Carville.
James Carville, and the way they are, politically different, but they can go home and have dinner together.
But they weren't politically different.
But I would love to have be a fly on the wall in that
my
house.
God,
to,
can you imagine?
Hear that conversation.
He said it was a shit show. What are you going to do about it?
I think that she's like, listen, honey, of course it's a shit show. But could you just...
Shut up.
Please stop tweeting about it. Would you please stop it?
I like
I gotta
that
go to
check.
work.
I like that check.
Or you know what? I'll take that a step further. I think that she says, okay, honey, listen to what this dumbass did today. Could you please write something that says A, B, C, D? Because...
I can't.
Yeah, because I just can't with him.
Well, the way it goes in my home, it's something like, oh, I saw what you posted today. And the next day, a few people said something to me about what you posted yesterday. And then by third or fourth day, can you take that post down, please?
Well, as somebody once said to me, every man in this household is married wants to be right and happy, but they would rather be happy.
That's right.
I think they're on the same side.
All right. Let's move on. Last topic. We're almost out of time. Mueller Wars. Let's be clear. The appointment of Matthew Whitaker was for one purpose and one purpose only: shutting down the Mueller investigation. While it raises multiple legal and constitutional issues, Trump has, in his not-so-secret way, once again thrown the Constitution and the rule of law aside and said, stop me. Go ahead.
All I can say is they have a hell of a vetting process at the White House.
If you didn't see Stephen Colbert's takedown of Matthew Whitaker, you just got to...
It's the most classic thing I've seen in a long
It is
time.
as funny as funny gets. This guy is. There is nothing about this guy that there's just
Talk about no redeeming qualities.
none. There's none. This guy has no business being at the head of the Justice Department. He has no business emptying trash cans at the Justice Department. Not only is he a lackey for President Trump on getting rid of the Mueller investigation, he was under investigation for working at before he got into the administration, for working at a company that did patents. I can't remember the name of it now. World Patent something. And they patented different things like. They were patenting a toilet for people that were well endowed, and it was deeper so that your junk didn't fall into the water when you were. This is true.
Is there a website for that?
This is true, and
You know what? I bet that toilet is like a #1 seller on Amazon.
for the NBA.
No, that's stereotypical.
Really?
That's stereotypical.
Did you go there?
Oh, come on.
Here's the deal.
Come on. Everybody was thinking it.
Nobody was thinking that.
I'm just going to put one in my guest bathroom so people will think.
I thought it would be a #1 seller because in the same way, what's the name of that condom? Anyone. Trojans don't come in small.
Yeah.
They come in large and extra large.
Yeah.
So
Magnum?
Yeah. Oh,
I always bought Magnums.
I think that people
This is way
Think
too
they
much
need-
information.
This
need
guy
that toilet.
worked for this company. He was a paid advisor for the company, and the FTC shut him down and fined them millions upon millions of dollars. And he is now the Attorney General of the United States.
Well, it just shows that Trump hires the best and the brightest.
Well,
Still.
we're talking about Attorney General, folks, but even that was sort of the comical portion of it. But then they went back. He ran for the Senate in Iowa, I believe.
Yeah.
And they took out this clip from one of the campaign not. It didn't look like a debate. It just looked like some kind of town hall
Forum,
type
yeah,
meeting. Forum. And he said, they asked him what kind of characteristics he looked for in judges, and he made a big point of saying that he just wanted Christian judges.
Yeah, they had to be Christian.
That was a way to
They had to lead a Christian
judge
life.
them.
In all seriousness, this guy, Trump has been saying all along, I need a lawyer in the attorney general's
Right.
position. Like, this guy is supposed to represent Donald Trump and not the people of the United States. And that's the issue that I have with this appointment.
That's a great point.
Yeah. The day after Trump appointed Whitaker to be the acting attorney general, he did an interview with the Daily Caller. And when they asked him about the appointment of Whitaker, he said, and this was his answer about the appointment of Whitaker, his answer was, as far as I'm concerned, this is an investigation that never should have been brought. It never should have been had. It's something that never should have been brought. It's an illegal investigation. That's the answer to the appointment of why Whitaker was appointed acting attorney general. So there you go. That's all you need to know.
Right.
So
that
basically,
pretty
that
much
was a
tells
job
us what-
interview.
Right.
That was a job interview.
That was it.
He was giving there to the Daily Caller.
So-
But I'm not clear on how this scenario plays out.
Well,
Do either of you?
well,
or any of
I
you-
think,
We'll
I
have to
think,
see
I
if
think
the
there's
re-
a second shooter drop, if I may borrow a cliche, and I think that something's going to happen maybe before Thanksgiving.
Look, it is so disturbing that even Senate Republicans are saying you've got to replace this guy. John Cornyn came out and said that he has no confidence in Whitaker to do this job. And Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma said that Trump's pick needs to be replaced.
Kiss ass Cornyn is saying that. You know he has problems.
And I'm
sucked up to him on everything else.
I'm really glad that Lindsey Graham was really outraged with Jeff Sessions being let go and has been almost silent on this appointment. So I just believe, as you do, Chris, in the integrity of the Republican Party.
Don't be surprised if Lindsey Graham is not the next Attorney General of the United States.
I was wondering how
Is that a
this
prediction?
plays
Yeah.
out in terms
Okay.
of the Mueller investigation.
Oh, I think that that's the reason he's there is
Yeah.
to do something about Mueller, and then he'll be replaced.
But-
That's my view.
But the thing about it is, whatever Mueller has found up until this point is not going to go away just because that investigation is shut down.
Well, we'll see, because
but they
the
have
Senate the Senate was going to take up that bill to protect Mueller, and
Right.
the Senate leader, what's his name?
McConnell.
McConnell blocked it, so that it's not gonna happen before the end of the year.
But the Democrats basically are going to take over in January.
Only
but-
in the House, but it's already passed the House. The Senate will not take it up. McConnell blocked it. The Senate, it will never go to the president.
What the point I was going to make is they must start to do things now to delay whatever Trump and this AG are trying to do. And at that point, when they do take over, they need to somehow preserve anything that they want to destroy, that they don't want the American people to see.
Yeah, well, we'll see. All right, let's move in out of left field. That's all the time we have today. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I just have a very short thing to say. One of the things about Donald Trump is that as far as the charges of racism leveled against him, he's always sort of got some sort of plausible deniability. It's really implausible, but for the purpose of this out of left field, plausible deniability. In, for example, some very fine people on both sides. I'm just being equal. I'm not referring to race. I'm referring to their actual intellect, whatever it is. But Andrew Gillum, the man who did not win the Florida governorship, unfortunately, came up with a wonderful test for know you're racist. It doesn't matter if you and me and everyone else thinks he's a racist. What matters is, do the racists think you are a racist? And clearly, Donald Trump it has been a boon to the white nationalist groups all over the country, and they have made him their standard bearer. So I like that test, and that is the test that I'm going to use. If the racists think you're a racist, then you are in fact a racist.
So last week when that snarky millennial asked my sister Andrea, what did Barack Obama do? And I'm going back to that question. And I'm going to start it off by saying that Barack Obama was elected as the first African-American president. And Barack Obama never professed to govern from the left. As Chris Bell suggested, he was not going in there to overreach. And so Barack Obama governed from the middle to try to bring people together. But the point I'm trying to make is this is what he did. He saved the country from a recession. He passed the Affordable Care Act. He got the Lilly Ledbetter Act signed to combat pay discrimination against women. He ended the war in Iraq. Wait. I'm sorry. He started to draw down the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Among other things, he appointed Sotomayor as a Supreme Court justice. He negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. He ended the Bush era torture practices. He saved the auto industry. When you think about those things, think about saving the auto industry and all of those blue-collar workers who work in that industry. He did a bunch of things that people forget because of short-term memory. But if you look at what he inherited when he came into office, he did so many things that a lot of people didn't think he could do. But so Barack Obama accomplished a whole lot. And to those people who didn't think he was leftist enough, you need to understand that this is not a leftist country. We govern from the middle, and when we're successful, we govern from the middle.
Can I add that he brought dignity to that office?
Well, I was just about to
of dignity.
I was just about to say that, because while accomplishing all that, he did act with a great deal of integrity and in a dignified manner. And I posted this on Facebook. It's drawn quite a few shares and it's drawn quite a few comments. But a guy by the name of James Little has written about this pastor, and it says, "Pastor, when white folks say Obama was an embarrassment, here's what you say." And the pastor, by the way, is white. And he says, one of the common responses to criticism of Donald Trump by his voters is something along the lines, "Obama was an embarrassment for 8 years," end quote. One Christian pastor is calling out that notion. John Pavlovitz has penned an open letter to those white Trump voters, informing them that no, in fact, they weren't embarrassed by the former president. Were you embarrassed by his lone and enduring 25-year marriage to a strong woman he's never ceased to publicly praise, respect, or cherish? Were you embarrassed by the way he lovingly and sweetly parented and protected his daughters? Pavlovitz writes these along with a lot of other relevant questions. I'd recommend looking it up on Facebook, because it's a really great piece that calls these people. No, he was not an embarrassment. He was someone we can be proud of. And now that we have a real embarrassment in there, that's the only thing they can say in response.
Yeah.
So my out of left field, I want to talk about my last weekend. My daughter, Maria, got the 3 pieces of jewelry that she makes into the very first New York Jewelry Week. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I flew to New York, flew in to support her. We flew into a snowstorm and got off the plane and had to take the train into Manhattan because we couldn't get a cab, and walked out into this raging snow. It was like being in the movie The Day After Tomorrow.
But Chris, I don't want to interrupt you, but who catches cabs now?
I do.
Okay.
Because the Uber would have taken an hour and 45 minutes. Okay. And there was no cabs either, so we had to take the train. But thank you for
Boy, you shut down that uppity
Thank
leftist.
you for interrupting my my out of left field. And so we finally got to the hotel, and my daughter met us there, and she proceeded to walk us through the snowstorm to look at jewelry all over Manhattan.
Wow.
And I thought that my toes would turn black and fall off by the next morning. She walked us for miles. I think that we walked enough to walk home from Manhattan. My legs revolted by the end of the evening, and they thought that I was mad at them. And this is all in support of love for your daughter. But I'm very proud of her and getting into New York Jewelry Week. www.mariatritico.com. I'm very, very proud of her for getting into New York Jewelry Week. 3 pieces. Congratulations, honey.
Onward through the
Here. And Chris, before we sign off, I want to just say to all of our listeners, we wish y'all a happy Thanksgiving with your families and a safe one. And, continue to listen. And, Andrea, what else should they do?
They should.
I haven't gotten there yet.
Oops. Okay, so since you haven't gotten there, our guest last week, Evan Mintz, I thought he was phenomenal.
He was great.
He was good. I loved
great.
it. It's the funny thing is when you aren't here and you listen to the show, he was so good. And it's just Chris sounded like grumpy old man, basically saying, "Get off my lawn." You know,
We never said that.
I don't think we sounded that way at all. I thought we sounded brilliant.
No. It was like, Chris, I could hear you grunt over here, dude.
No, it wasn't like that. But I think it does raise an interesting point, and I thought it was a great show, and I hope Evan will be willing to come back. He's certainly a lot more entertaining than James. But but we don't offer ourselves as a barometer for the furthest left ideals in America. We offer diverse takes on the issues of the day, and we never come at it from the same place or usually wind up at the same place. But that's why we call it What's Left America, not because we think we're the end-all and be-all when it comes to progressive thought, but we consider ourselves progressive and like to weigh in every week.
I learned a lot.
Well, there we go. That's all that matters. All right. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, we need you to do what, Andy?
Subscribe-olio.
It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment and Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you next week.